Hey everyone, it's Sarah, and I am back to film a May monthly reading journal. So let's get into it. First of all, I have my overview for the month. I had a lot of overlapping books that I was starting when I still had other books going on. I had some books that I was reading specifically, audiobooks, with my husband. So then, that I had another audiobook going at the same time for just me. So, kind of a lot of overlap. There were some books that took me a while to get through, some that didn't take as long. But yeah, there's kind of the brief overview there. And then getting into May. So, I read 9 books this month, a total of 2,848 pages. And then my favorite book was Educated. And we'll get into that in just a bit. Then again, here's my other overview. This is just in a monthly layout with boxes. But as you can see, I had a lot of like started, and not a lot of finished in that section. So yeah, I had a lot of plates moving at the same time. Then I have my May bingo from the Shelfie Chronicles. This one, honestly, I didn't look at the May bingo very much. So then I got to the end of the month and I didn't have a bingo. So I used for ugly cover. I don't know. I probably judge books by their cover, and I buy a lot of books with cute covers. But also too, I don't know. I don't think that anything's ugly necessarily. So I just picked the book that I read this month that wasn't like a beautiful cover, but yeah, just so I could have a bingo there. Then I had my reading trackers, so days that I read, and then whether it was book or an audiobook or both. And then I have the list of books that I read this month. And then my top priorities. My number one priority was reading The Answer Is. That one's been on my reading shelf, my bookshelf, for years since it came out. And then the library books, I had picked up some books from the library. My library does a book box, a mystery book box. So you can fill out a form once a month and they'll pick out 2 books based on, you know, what your interests are or what you've recently read and, kind of give you a surprise box. I didn't finish those books, but I had 2 other library books that I did read this month. And then those 2 boxes from that book I'll be reading in June. So far, one of them is just not my favorite, but I haven't finished it yet. And then here's where I take notes on specifically the book bingo, but I can use it for other things as well. Like I said, I didn't focus too much on the book bingo, so I don't have a lot going on there. And that's all for my monthly planner. And then getting into the rest of my reading journal. I am just chugging right along on this Goodreads tracker. I can't remember what I set my goal as for this year. I want to say it was 75, which I think I'm going to blow out of the water. But last year I read 62 or something like that. So it wasn't an unreasonable goal when I set it, but I think because I've been making this journal and I just love it so much, and I've been driving a lot for my job and everything. I've just been reading a lot this year, so not a bad thing. Now getting into what books I read. The first book I read was kind of a dud. It was called The Guilt Trip. I did it as an audiobook. It was listed as a thriller, but it really didn't have a lot of thrill until the last 20 or 30 pages, maybe. Basically, it is a destination wedding that these 3 couples are staying in the same house for this destination wedding, including the couple that's going to get married. And I don't know, it was just, there was a lot of interpersonal like relationship, like, is so and so having an affair? Is so and so having an affair? Are they having an affair together? And it was just, I don't know, it was just boring. I don't know. It was just a little bit of like snooping and a lot of just like in her head worrying and things like that. And there wasn't a lot of action, there wasn't a lot of drama. It was a little predictable, like obviously someone's going to be having an affair, or um and then the last like 25, 30 pages, like I said, at the wedding something big and dramatic happens, and then there's like an epilogue, and then that made me confused as to what really happened. And I don't like books that confuse me in the sense that they're just confusing to be confusing. And so I don't know. I gave it 2 stars instead of 1 star just because there was a lot of drama that happened in the end, but then at the same time too, I felt like they tried to put a twist in there that didn't make sense, and I don't know. I wouldn't recommend that one. Not my fave. Then we have Hang the Moon. This one was my book of the month for April. I read this as a book club with my best friend. We both look at the list and choose the same book each month. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. I've read other Jeanette Walls books before. Half Broke Horses and The Glass Castle. Glass Castle is fabulous if you've never read one of her books. And so I saw her name on the list of Goodreads or Book of the Month choices, and so I really wanted to read this one. Like I said, I really enjoyed it. It's historical fiction. It follows a kind of like a family dynasty that goes through a lot of different changes, and who's in power in this family during like the Prohibition era. And I don't know, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed, you know, each segment of the book was, a different person in power. And yeah, I thought it was great. Then we got to the book club um, day, and at the end of the book, the author talks about her inspiration for the story, and she talks about taking a lot of inspiration from the Tudors, and that all just went over my head. I guess I don't. Well, I mean, I know about the Tudors, but I guess it just, you know, I just did not catch a lot of the references when I was reading the book, which made me feel a little dumb afterwards. My best friend, on the other hand, she was like, I immediately knew it was about the Tudors. I think one of the characters was even named Jane, and, Mary, or things like that. And so she didn't enjoy it as much. She gave it, I think, 2 stars because she just thought it was the Tudors set in Prohibition. Um, but like I said, I enjoyed it, not getting all of those references, but I think she read it and was annoyed by by all of the similarities, I guess. Um, so you may like it, you may not. I liked it. I like I said, I would read it again. I don't think my best friend would. So then we go to One Italian Summer. This was another audiobook that I just didn't love. It sounded really special. It was a girl and her mother dies, and they were supposed to be going to take this trip to Italy together before she died, and she ends up going on this trip alone and kind of learning more about her mom and growing up, because her mom spent a summer in Italy before she was born. And so, from that premise, it sounded beautiful. It sounded like it would be really nice. It'd be funny, maybe a little bit sad at times because she's grieving her mom, and, but also an Italian vacation. I This girl was obsessed with her mom. Like, she talks about her mom being her favorite person, the best person. Her mom was like this perfect person, like perfect chef, perfect, knew the answers to all of the questions and things like that. And yet her daughter doesn't know how to cook. Like, her mom never taught her. And I don't know, she just spends so much time just talking about how, like, yeah, how much her mom was just like the perfect person, and how is she going to go on. And I don't know, I just couldn't get behind it. And it was, yeah, like I said, the first day I started this, also, since it's an audiobook, I was reading it and everyone kept calling me while I was on my drive. And so I ended up only listening to like 5-10 minutes that first day in the 2 hours that I was driving. And I said, I don't even know if I want to keep reading it because it's just depressing. And even like as I kept going with it, it just wasn't my favorite. I mean, I read it in 4 or 5 days, but it was more so that I was forcing myself to read it. And it wasn't very long. I think it was like 7 hours. Oh, yeah, 6 hours and 21 minutes. So it wasn't a long audiobook, but boy, it was just, like I said, I just didn't like it that much. Then there was like a weird time travel aspect in there. And for a book that was really realistic, I just thought that that was unnecessary and weird. So that was One Italian Summer. Then we have The Housemaid's Secret. I read The Housemaid in my last month in April. And so this was the follow up. I liked it a lot. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was very similar to The Housemaid, except you kind of knew the punchline, or there wasn't as much mystery, I thought, as the first one. There definitely were some twists and things like that, but for the most part, it was just kind of, if you liked The Housemaid, you'd like The Housemaid's Secret. I definitely recommend The Housemaid regardless. Then we have Educated. This was my favorite book this month. 5 stars. This was an audiobook. Oh, I didn't even put the, I need to go back and put my, how long the audiobook was because I excluded that. But it was an audiobook I listened to with my husband. And we read it in like 3 days because we had been driving around a lot that weekend. It was Mother's Day weekend and our anniversary. So we were all over the place driving and had a lot of time in the car. And this is about Tara and her family. She grew up in Idaho and actually not too far away from where I went to school. I grew up in Idaho as well, but our lives couldn't have been more different. Her family, her dad and her mom, were distrustful of the government, and I think they had, I can't remember how many kids they had, 7, I think. And like the younger 4 didn't have birth certificates because they didn't want to register their kids with the government, and like they didn't want to send their kids to school because they thought that they would be brainwashed and things like that, where yeah, she just didn't have an education growing up. And then she, you know, learns to, I don't know how she learns to read. I guess I can't remember that part of it, but she learns to read. She begins to kind of teach herself things, and eventually goes on, to college and graduate school and everything else. And it's how she gets an education. Um, but it's also just a lot of really interesting stories. And like I said, her family is so different than anything that I've heard before. And it's crazy because it's a real story. It's a memoir. It's kind of like when I read the Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. It is just one of those stories where you kind of read it and you can't believe that all of those things happened to one person, or that someone's life was like that. And yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed it. My husband enjoyed it. We laughed, we cried, and yeah, I thought it was a really good book. And it also kind of makes you appreciate certain things that, you know, if you were in her situation, would you be where she is today now or not? Or, yeah. So, really, really like that book. If you've not read it, it's been out for a really long, or, a while. And so, if you haven't gotten a chance to read it, I would recommend it. And the audiobook was really good as well. Then we have The Kingdoms of Savannah. This was another audiobook. Not my favorite. I gave it 3 stars. Um, I I think that the description of the book, like on the back cover, I don't think that that's accurate to what the book is about. I feel like, because I think it talks about Morgana being the head of a family dynasty in Savannah, and things going wrong and things like that. But there's a lot of characters in it. There's a lot of points of view in it. um, you start off with Luke and Stony, and they're at a bar, and they're both homeless, I believe. Kind of, yeah, on the lesser, I don't know, lesser side. They're definitely on the poorer side of society, but I believe they're also part of the homeless population. Because apparently Savannah has a lot of homeless, which I did not know. Never been to Savannah, and um, and then like they're outside of the bar, and Stony gets kidnapped, and Luke gets killed, and then you kind of go from there. But then the perspective switches to like Jack and Ransom and Morgana, and like I said, they're part of this wealthy family in Savannah. Although Ransom, one of the sons, is homeless. He had something happen in his life where he went from being, like a lawyer to homeless. So spent some time in jail or prison. Um, I don't know quite how to explain it, but basically, they're kind of trying to figure out what happened to them, but at the same time, too, most people don't know that Stoney's missing for a really long part in the book because she's homeless, and based on her personality, people just say like, "Oh yeah, she just kind of like disappears sometimes." Um, but I don't know. I felt like some of the characters, you were told what they were going to be, and then later in the book, they're not that way. Like they weren't consistent throughout the book, and then I don't know, some of the storylines just weren't as interesting as others. They spend some time in like homeless camps and things like that. And the different segments of the book, I think there's like five, are the different kingdoms of Savannah, which they explain at the end, which I guess is kind of clever. But then I don't know. There was actually a lot of history in Savannah, or in the book, regarding Savannah that, again, I didn't know about until the end when they kind of went over it. So, you know, that's good. But yeah, I don't know. It just wasn't my favorite. Like I said, there are a lot of perspectives, and I don't know, the little secret in the end for like why she's kidnapped and what this is all about. I don't know if that necessarily seemed worth killing for and everything. Um, so, and they basically tell you the end, or one of the characters predicts the end or whatever, and then that's how it ends. And I thought that there should have been a twist or something like that. Like, it was weird that, well, wait, you told us that, and then that was what happened. Yeah. Anyways, so I don't. When I'm expecting a twist and then there's not a twist, I'm like, oh, okay, well, you told us that 30 pages ago. So yeah, not totally my favorite. It wasn't the worst book ever, but yeah, I wouldn't pick it up again. Then I have The Peach Keeper. Again, not my favorite book. 3 stars. This one sounded like it was going to be more of a thriller mystery. And again, they kind of just told you what it was. And it was more about people's relationships than it was the mystery and the murder and things like that. Um, so this was about Willa, and her family used to be very, very wealthy. They were the ones that essentially started this town. Back in the day, it used to be, I believe it was lumber that they made their money in, lumber or mining. And then at one point, her family lost their power, lost their money. And so then she has a lower social standing than obviously her family used to. But then her old family home still exists, it's still there. And another person in the town who's in high society or higher society, Paxton, she decides to renovate this home to make into like a posh B&B type event, maybe event center kind of a place. And they're going to have this big party to celebrate. There's this girls' women's society. So they're celebrating the anniversary of this women's society and then also like the grand opening of the house. And they're removing an old tree on the property when they find a body. And so then they're, and this body is about 75 years old and, would have been from the time that Willa's grandmother still lived at the house. And it turns out that Willa and Paxton's grandmothers were best friends back in the day. So, like I said, it just, you thought with like finding a body and the mystery and stuff, it was very slow. It was very, you know, boring. Uh, and at times, I was trying to finish reading it because it was like a book from my library that I think I only had for 14 days. And so I was trying to push through and finish it so that I could return it. But yeah, it just wasn't my fave. Um, I, yeah, like I said, there wasn't a ton of mystery in it. There wasn't a ton of excitement, I guess. And it kind of, I hate it, or I guess I don't connect with it as much when characters are one way and they hate each other, or, they're at ends, and then all of a sudden, like, they're best friends. And it doesn't really feel like anything particular happened. And then all of a sudden, they're best friends or they're in love or, everything is just right. And without very little effort or with very little effort, if that makes sense, because that's just not realistic to life. There was also like a weird magic component, but it was very like, again, with like the realistic magic and the time travel, maybe that's just not my genre, but I just thought it was unnecessary and weird and I didn't understand it. um I don't know, I just didn't think it added anything to the story and it was just confusing. So that was The Peach Keeper. Then I have The Answer Is. This is, again, like I said, it's been on my to be read list for basically since it came out about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And it's Alex Trebek's memoir that he wrote a couple of months before he died. Probably longer. It probably takes longer to write a book than that. It was published a couple of months before he died. I'm a big Jeopardy fan, even though I don't get to watch it very much because of work and life and everything. But love Jeopardy. I think Alex Trebek is really cool. Would have been nice to meet him or, go to a taping of Jeopardy when he was alive. Never did that. But it was just nice. It was learning about his life and kind of how he got to be in TV. And then they also had a lot of talk about like Jeopardy and famous episodes or contestants or moments. And so it was just a really nice book. There were a lot of pictures in there. So it was not a long read. I read it in 2 or 3 days. Um, but no, I really enjoyed it. And especially when it's someone that really interests you, I think that makes a memoir go by, really fast. And yeah. Then the last book I have is Quarry Girls, The Quarry Girls. This was a book that I was at the library and I saw this book. I couldn't find it as an audiobook, so I had to place a hold on it at my library. And it was a thriller, kind of it was interesting. So the first couple of pages of the book are just talking about the author's history with the town and that area growing up in Minnesota in the 70s, and how there were actually a couple of serial killers that I didn't know about in this particular area of this town of St. Cloud where she grew up. And this is kind of, I think, loosely based on that kind of time frame experience. I don't think that these are based on true crimes, so to speak, even though some of the reviews on Goodreads definitely said they were. But I don't know that these are actually, yeah, it's not a true crime novel, it's a thriller, if that makes sense. But you have three girls, they're three best friends. They're in a band. They have grown up together, and they live in this part of St. Cloud called Pantown. And it was essentially a failed motor company that the leader of this motor company had built this whole subdivision, more or less, little town next to his factory with all of these houses and businesses and things like that so that they could easily get to work. And then they also, because it's Minnesota and there's a lot of snow, he also had tunnels that connected all of the houses to the factory. So there's this like tunnel system going underneath the town, which I thought was a really interesting part of the book. I couldn't find online that these tunnels actually exist in real life. I did find that the town does exist, this Pan town, but I couldn't find any mention of the tunnels. So I don't know if that was just creative liberty, but I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And I think that's part of what makes it um, a really unique kind of book, just a unique setting, I guess. And then there's a lot of quarries around because I think the town also has a lot of like mining um, rock and other stones. So basically, you have these three girls growing up in this very small community, and everyone knows everyone. A lot of people probably know secrets they shouldn't, but one of them goes missing. Well, another girl goes missing first, but then they're like, oh, maybe she's not missing. You know, she was about to go off to college anyways. And you get some chapters from her point of view as she's being held captive. And then you also have other girls that go missing too, including one of the friends in this trio. And so the other two are trying to, um, I don't know, just try to look into it because some of the cops are not really invested in it. Again, like maybe she just ran away. Maybe she's just, didn't tell her mom that she was leaving or something like that. Um, but um, but then you get into some murders and the investigation, and then there's a lot of um, like I said, everyone kind of knows little secrets about each other because of these tunnels, and this close knit community. And so the suspicion falls on a lot of different people, especially people that um, should exhibit the most trust in a community. And so yeah, I don't know. I don't want to give too much away, but I really enjoyed it. Um, Probably like a 4.5 rounded up to a 5 stars. But I enjoyed it. I wanted to keep reading it. So that's always a good sign of a book. I know I had to set it down one day before work because I knew if I kept reading, I'd get to, a part where I absolutely could not put it down, and then I would be late for work. So I think that's a sign of a good book. And thrillers are always fun, like thrillers, mysteries, I really enjoy in general. So the Quarry Girls was great, and I really liked it. And like I said, it's loosely has some history woven in there. Um, Not sure how much of it is true, but there were parts that were really cool and interesting, and things I didn't know, like this Pan Town and everything. Um, so yeah, so that was all of the books I read this month. Like I said, some good, some not as good, but it was a nice mix. And I feel like in April I started off with like a couple of duds right in the row. Um, and this time I started off with a dud, but I still had some really good ones mixed in there too. Then again, just moving right along through my reading challenges. Um, and like I said in my last video, I'm getting to the point where I'm in general not just picking up a random book and then having them fit the remaining prompts. So I kind of have to pick some books with these prompts in mind if I'm expecting to finish it, which I think it'd be really cool if I finished a challenge, but I'm not sure that I will or not. The two challenges that I will for sure probably complete this time. I have the buzzword challenge, which I've been um, it's basically just one book a month that has a word in it or a theme kind of. Um, I guess it's a word in the title. So like January was life and death, February was verbs, March was secrets, April was emotions, and then May was flavors, spices, and seasonings. So I did the peach keeper for that one just because peach flavoring. And then June is other. So I think you could do like mother, other, brother, whatever comes up in the title there. So that's one that I definitely think I'll finish. And then I also have I completed a reading challenge in 2023 by the Shelfie Chronicles. This one definitely is one that um, is meant to be a challenge that you can finish and like say you did it. I think it's funny. Alex, I think, is the owner, and she talked about not finishing any of her challenges in 2022, and so she wanted one that everyone could basically finish. It includes things like a beautiful cover, something from your never-ending TBR, a mood read, a comfort read, meant to read last year, last book you bought or borrowed, last book you read in 2023, first book you read in 2023. So, um, you know, there's definitely at least two challenges that I think I'll be able to complete. And then a lot of the other ones, it would just be nice if I did. Like, I'm getting closer on my A to Z challenge. I'm actually pretty close on my, or close-ish on my Quidditch Cup. This one I do think I might be able to finish as well, but I just think it's fun to have these challenges, and it's a fun part of finishing a book, going through my reading journal, and then writing down the different prompts or how much progress I'm making. So, anyways, that was everything I had for this month's reading journal. I hope you enjoyed watching this, and I will just catch you in my next video. Bye now.